Humans are always out there searching for life on other planets, but honestly, we've got all kinds of life right here on Earth. Animals, birds, sea creatures, bugs, and of course, us human beings. And we're pretty lucky because, as one scientist said, for everything to work out so perfectly, it's like a tornado hit a junkyard and somehow built a Boeing. Right now, we've got 71% of the Earth covered by oceans and 29% by land. But what if we messed with that balance just a little bit and turned that 29% of land into 100%, completely drying up all the oceans on the planet? It would be the end for us, surely, but how much time would we have before extinction? How would it change the planet's rotation, magnetic field, environment, and everything else? What creatures would survive, and what new ones could show up in a world like that? Today we're going to get into all of that, but first, here's a quick reminder. If you enjoy these kind of videos, let YouTube know by hitting that like button, because it really helps the channel to grow and gives me the green light to make more videos like this. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it's a great time to do it. Your subscription is especially important to help this video get even more views, particularly if you do so while watching the video. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. So, all of the oceans have disappeared and we're left with only land. Now, first of all, we'd have to say goodbye to all the marine life. There's not a whole lot to discuss because they'd just all go extinct without a chance. But what about us humans? Before we get into our own extinction, let's take a moment to realize the enormous space for exploration that will be left behind by the oceans. Oh, and by the way, do you know what percentage of the oceans we've explored so far? Any guesses? Well, you may be shocked to know it's a measly 5%. That's right, we've only explored 5% of everything down there in the depths, leaving 95% unexplored and unknown. So, before we all die without water, let's imagine what we'll discover in those deepest of places. Just imagine about 140 million square miles, a staggering amount of land, more than twice the size of the continents put together. It would kind of be like having an additional continent almost 40 times the size of the United States, and basically, it would be like traveling back in time. Nobody would be surprised by the remains of the Titanic, but what about Atlantis, for example, or something even older? It's the kind of discovery that could completely change everything we know about human civilization. Proof that advanced societies may have existed long before we thought possible, and those deep-sea trenches, like the Mariana Trench, would be out there wide open, revealing some seriously weird and wild landscapes. We'd probably come across a whole bunch of creatures we've never seen before. Stuff that lived in complete darkness under crushing pressure. Like giant squids and bizarre fish, and maybe even bioluminescent creatures that glow in the dark. And then there are the underwater volcanoes and lava tubes, which would look insane without all of that water covering them up. And if there were even a chance that we would survive, countries would fight fiercely for huge deposits of rare minerals and methane hydrates, which are basically frozen gas that could be used for energy. We might even find fossilized remains of ancient marine life, underwater mountains and ridges, submarine canyons, and ancient river systems. When in reality, if any of the oceans did suddenly dry up, most of that deep-sea terrain would be pretty much impossible to explore. I'm talking about extreme pressures and toxic gases, no atmosphere to keep us all alive. And so, the idea of quickly exploring the newly exposed ocean floor before we go extinct is more of a what if than something that could actually happen. Speaking of humans, once marine life goes extinct, we are next in line. So now, let's talk about what would actually go down. After the oceans dry up, we'd probably have, maybe a few weeks, maybe a couple of months before things really began to fall apart. The first thing we would notice, which is no surprise, would be the lack of fresh water. Oh, and no more rain either, because rain happens when water from the oceans evaporates, forms clouds, and then comes back down to Earth. So without all that, there's no rain, no rivers, and all the lakes would dry up pretty fast. Places that are already dry, like Africa and the Middle East, would get hit the hardest and probably see mass extinction first. As the days go by, temperatures would begin to spike. Without the oceans to keep things in check, some places would get scorching hot while others would end up freezing. Cities near the equator would become unlivable almost immediately, and with no vegetation, oxygen levels would drop, making it harder to breathe, especially in crowded areas. Africa, Australia, parts of Asia, they would all be hit first because of the extreme heat and the lack of water. Countries with more fresh water, like North America and Europe, might hang on just a bit longer, but not by much. Agriculture would collapse, and that would lead to food shortages, and the heat would make growing anything nearly impossible. People would begin moving to cooler areas, causing overcrowding and even resource wars, and one by one, the continents would see society break down. In the end, Antarctica might be the last place to offer any kind of refuge, since the rest of the world would be well over 140 degrees by then. But even that wouldn't last very long. As the planet keeps heating up and resources run out, human life would become unsustainable everywhere. So yeah, in just a couple of months, we're all toast. But rising temperatures are just the tip of the iceberg. What about the drastic changes in the Earth's rotation? Because the thing is, the oceans do play a huge role in stabilizing Earth's rotation. Right now, the mass of water in the oceans helps distribute the planet's weight evenly, and if you suddenly get rid of all that water, the balance is going to be totally thrown off. I mean, just imagine Earth as a spinning top. If you mess with its weight, it's going to begin wobbling, and that's exactly what would happen here. So, without the oceans, the mass distribution would change, and Earth's rotation would slow down. Days would get longer, maybe by a few minutes, or maybe by a few hours, and that's not all. It could also cause the Earth to tilt more on its axis, leading to even more extreme seasons, with summers becoming unbearably hot and winters even more cold. Another wild thing to think about is how the lack of oceans would affect tidal forces. The moon's gravitational pull on the oceans creates the tides, and those tides actually help to regulate the Earth's spin. No oceans means no tides, and that would lead to an even more unstable rotation over time. With all of these changes, some parts of the world could experience never-ending daylight or darkness for months on end. It just depends on how that tilt shifts. And we're only at the beginning of the chaos. Do you enjoy sunny weather? I mean, who doesn't enjoy it when the sun comes out, giving us all clear skies and warmth and a chance to bask in the sun? But the sun is actually a pretty dangerous thing, because if the sun's rays directly hit your skin without any protection, you'd be exposed to high levels of radiation, and that could cause severe sunburns, skin cancer, and radiation sickness. Even just spending a short time in the sun would result in some serious damage. But why doesn't it happen now? Well, that's because of the Earth's magnetic field, which acts like a shield and protects us from harmful solar radiation. But without all the oceans, the magnetic field would weaken or even fail over time. You see, those oceans help move the tectonic plates, which plays a big role in keeping the Earth's magnetic field stable. And without this protective shield, well, the planet would get bombarded by solar winds and cosmic rays, and that constant bombardment would have devastating effects on the planet. The extra radiation on the surface would be non-stop, stripping away the atmosphere and causing widespread destruction. Over time, the atmosphere could thin out even more, making the planet even more vulnerable to space weather. I mean, just imagine, what was once a shielded, thriving planet would turn into a barren, radiation-soaked wasteland with solar winds sweeping across the surface and cosmic rays hitting everything in their path. Oh, and by the way, would there be any forms of life that wouldn't go extinct by then? I mean, could new kinds of life emerge in those extreme planet conditions? Well, actually, yes and yes. I'll be talking about that next, but right now I think is the perfect time to hit that like button if you're enjoying this video. And also, double check to see if you're subscribed, because that's the best way to help the channel grow. I want you to know that I've got an entire playlist of different what-if scenarios, like what if humans evolved to live forever? Or what if you were the last human on Earth? And what if AI took over the world? There are also plenty more, and I'm sure that you're going to find something that you like, so feel free to check those out after this video. Now, with all that being said, let's move on to the final part. So, what forms of life would survive and not go extinct? Well, we're definitely not talking about plants, animals, or humans. There'd be no chance for them in such an environment. Only the most resilient and adaptable life forms, like microorganisms, would have even a shot of making it through. Now, it's not all that exciting to get into specific creatures, but most of these tough little organisms can survive just about anything, from the freezing temperatures to radiation and even the vacuum of space. In a world blasted by solar winds, they might still find a way to hang on, probably in some deep, hidden spots where they're just a little bit more protected. Some of these life forms don't even need oxygen to survive. They live in oxygen-free environments, often deep underground, and could keep on surviving even in a world that's lost most of its atmosphere. And then there's the weird case of radiation-resistant fungi, like Cryptococcus neoformans, which can actually thrive in places with high radiation. It's been found growing around Chernobyl, the abandoned city where a nuclear reactor exploded in the 80s, turning that area into a nuclear wasteland with radiation levels that are off the charts. But Google tells me that even these fungi need some water to survive. And while the amount of water on the planet would continue to decrease, it's unlikely it would ever reach zero. Glaciers and ice caps would gradually melt, groundwater and aquifers might persist for a long time, the atmosphere would still hold some water vapor, and small lakes, rivers, and streams could exist temporarily, especially in regions where groundwater or ice melt feeds them. As for the new forms of life, they would likely be some new microbial organisms. These new microbes could evolve to utilize alternative energy sources, such as chemical reactions from minerals or residual geothermal heat. However, they would be incredibly basic and highly specialized, far from the complex ecosystems we're familiar with today. The conditions would keep on getting worse, making it increasingly inhospitable for any form of complex life, and in the end, without the oceans, Earth would never return to being a normal place. So, that's pretty much how it would go down. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and even though I'm wrapping up, I've got something else that you may like. Click on this video to find out what it would be like if the Earth's population dropped by just 1 billion people. Thanks for watching. Don't bask in the sun without any magnetic field protection. Click on that video, and let's move there together.